The call comes through the walkie in the nurse's pocket, like a flicker of static and urgency. Health office to room 214. Now please. Student looks faint. The hallway outside is a river of noise. Rubber soles squeaking, lockers clanging. The faint, sweet, sour waft of floor cleaner undercut by the steam heat radiators that tick and hiss like impatient metronomes. Nurse Mara slips from the health office, snatches the small flashlight and the latex gloves without thinking, and sets off. The fluorescent lights overhead hum with a high insect whine pitch. She passes a bulletin board toothed with pushpins, a poster begging for blood donors, be a hero, and the burnt coffee smell of the teacher's lounge clawing at the edge of her breath. She's moving fast, but when she hits the bend near the art room, the temperature dips. The old windows here seal poorly, and November is threading its thin, cold fingers into the building. Room 214 waits with its door propped open by a thick calculus textbook. Lights too bright for the grey day. Ceiling panels softly buzzing, and the muffle of 30 restless bodies shifting on plastic chairs. The air in here smells like pencil shavings and washable markers, like the echo of wet wool drying on a radiator. The teacher, Mr. Colton, tall, with a tie that somehow looks like it came out of a different decade, meets her at the threshold, eyes wide and flicking back to a desk near the window. "Mara," he murmurs, barely keeping his voice from breaking. She won't roll up her sleeve. She looks off. Mara follows his glance. An 8-year-old sits with her back very straight, as if the posture itself might hold something back from slipping out. She's pale, paler than pale. Chin tucked, soft brown hair stuck to her forehead in damp threads. Her left arm is crossed over her right, not in a hug but a guard elbow clamped, sleeve bunched in her small fist. The room is too warm for the jacket she wears, a puffy lilac thing with a star pattern that glitters when the overhead light hits it just right. But she keeps it on, keeps holding that sleeve, like it's all that matters. Mara exhaled once, slow as a count to 3, and stepped forward. She always moved this way at first, not to spook them. No sudden angles, a quiet gravity, her ID badge tucked into her sweater so it wouldn't clack against the little emergency she was about to become part of. She crouched beside the desk. The varnished top smelled like lemon oil and faint dust. "Hey," she said softly, steady. "I'm Nurse Mara. What's your name?" The girl didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone. She was listening to something that no one else could hear, her attention arrowed inward. Her lips were chapped in the middle, a small split that would sting with each breath. "Leela," she muttered at last, and only then did her eyes dart sideways, a quick liquid glance that trembled at the edges. "Okay, Leela." Mara lowered herself further until she was eye level with the desk's underside, with the scuffed metal basket where students stow things, with the place where gum ends up hard as glass. She made her voice a warm blanket. "Mr. Colton called me because you're not feeling great. Is it a headache?" "Belly, you look a little, chilly-warm combination. That's a medical term." She smiled just enough. "Can I feel your forehead?" Leela didn't nod or shake her head. She seemed to be weighing things that existed on a scale no one else could see. The class buzzed around her. The scrape of a pencil, the whisper of 2 girls at the next table, the whir of the small laminator in the corner spitting out a shiny hall pass. Mr. Colton scattered the rest of the class into quiet reading, and a hush fell that felt less like silence and more like held breath. Mara reached out with the back of her hand. Cool fingertips meeting warmer skin. The heat was there. A soft furnace just under the surface, but not a spike. Not yet. She wasted no words. "Can we go down to the nurse's office? It's less bright there. We can take off your jacket and you can rest on the cot. I have a blanket that feels like a cloud." Lila's fist tightened on the sleeve. She whispered something so thin it might have been mistaken for a breath. That narrow, deviceless sound that only registers if you're already listening. She caught the tiny, stale, sweet smell of fruit snacks, something else like copper pennies, and the winter-clean scent of the girl's shampoo. Lila's eyes flicked to the doorway, then back, and she tilted her head just a fraction until her lips were at Mara's ear. "He says it only hurts at first." The words dropped like a pebble into Mara's center, rippling outward through all the places in her that had seen the cracked edges of human behavior. She went very still. Her mind did what trained minds do, asked 1,000 questions at once while her face stayed steady as a pond at dawn. He says, "Who? Only hurts at first. What does that mean? Shots? Blood draws? Something worse?" The cold from the hallway pressed a little deeper into room 214. "Who says that, sweetheart?" The words were a whisper over a whisper, just enough air to keep them afloat. "Is someone here telling you that? Is someone here telling you that? Or someone at home?" Leela's shoulders crawled up a fraction, her chin pressing into the puffy collar of her jacket. She didn't answer. She glanced at the clock. A standard black-rimmed school clock that made large seconds with its hand. The kind you can hear if you listen for it. Tick, tick, tick. The minute hand was tilted toward the 11. She also glanced very quickly at the door, then down at her sleeve. The hand not gripping her sleeve trembled as if something inside her was tuned to a frequency that the rest of the room wasn't. Mara's breath felt like it had changed temperature in her chest, warmed by something like fear, chilled by something like resolve. The words echoing in her head carried weight. He says it only hurts at first. In the long corridors of her memory, a door pushed open just enough to let a draft through. A story she had once heard, a mistake she had once made. Not now. For now there was only this. A little girl, pale, quiet, guarding a sleeve. "Can you roll that up for me?" Mara kept her voice soft, the kind of soft that has steel inside it. "I'll be very gentle. If something's hurting, I can help. We can sit by the window, the air's better there. Or we can go to my office and close the door, and you can tell me anything, okay?" Leela shook her head once sharply, then flinched as if the motion had tugged something that wasn't supposed to be tugged. She looked down, and the small, ash-blonde lashes of her eyes trembled on her cheeks. Mara reached for the cuff of the sleeve, not to yank, not to insist, but to demonstrate a slow, careful motion, a negotiation. The fabric was surprisingly warm, more than body heat. Through the quilt of jacket layers, a thin undershirt, a sweater, the puffy outer, she felt the suggestion of shape that didn't match the small roundness of a child's forearm. It was slightly oblong, slightly firm. Its edges weren't hard like bone. There was a seam. She could feel the faintest ridge where something met something. And under her fingertips, under the duvet of fabric and the hush of the room, there was the barest whisper of movement. Not the twitch of a muscle, a different kind of movement, like a tiny heartbeat in a shell. She pressed just a hair more, the way one presses a book to see if there's a bookmark inside. The sleeve responded with a subtle give. A living pressure against her fingers. Leila jerked her arm back as if Mara had reached into something's mouth. The girl's eyes flashed up, huge. The kind of look that has too much knowing in it for being 8. The class felt Leila's alarm even without understanding it. A hush thinned into awkward glances, then into the slow motion of a few kids craning their necks to see. "Okay," Mara said quickly, holding her hands up, palms visible, the universal sign for "I won't push you." "Okay. We can do this your way. But I need to help you, Leela. I need to make sure you're safe." She turned to Mr. Colton. "I'm going to bring her to the office. Can you call the principal and let her know?" And she hesitated, but only for a fraction of a second. Because the whispers in the corridors of her own past were louder now, tapping at the side door of her mind. "And call her parent or guardian. Ask them to come right away." The teacher nodded, already moving toward the phone on the wall. Of course, he looked at Leila with an expression that was equal parts worry and a teacher's practice don't panic calm. "You'll be okay, kiddo." Leela looked at the clock again. Tick, tick, tick. Her lips moved as if counting, as if replicating those ticks in her own cadence. "He says it only hurts at first," she murmured again, this time not quite to Mara, this time to a little recess inside herself. Her fist never left the sleeve. Mara stood, angled her body to gently herd Leila into movement without forcing. Outside the classroom, the hall slouched back into its fluorescent heat and its draft-chilled edges. Posters on the walls advertised a science fair the next week. A paper snowflake hung slightly crooked from the ceiling tile near the water fountain. The water fountain burbled, a sound like someone clearing their throat politely. As they walked, Lila kept half a step behind, her eyes scanning the hall the way prey animals scan a meadow. They turned the corner and caught the smell of the nurse's office already. Antiseptic and lemon, faint laundry detergent, the metallic whisper of unopened medical package. Mara kept talking in the calm way she always did, narrating the nothing, naming the things in the surroundings, the technique of building a bridge. We'll sit you on the cot. I'll get a cool cloth. You can breathe. We can try a small peek at your arm, or we can call a doctor to come take a look. You're in charge of how we do it. I just want to know you're okay. They entered the office. The fluorescent lights were softer here. One tube had burned out last week, and the custodian hadn't replaced it yet, so a warmer floor lamp filled one corner with a rain of honey yellow. A small heater buzzed near the baseboard, exhaling warmth, and the room carried the winter smell of wool coats hung on a standing rack. There was a big jar of stickers on the desk, shiny stars and smiling oranges and dogs, with thought bubbles that said, "Pour some." Lila's eyes flicked to them and away. Mara motioned to the cot. Lila didn't sit. She hovered near the door as if she might need to unmake this choice. Her gaze snagged on the phone on Mara's desk, then jerked to the window. Outside, sky fat with low clouds looked like a grey lid pressed onto the world. The windows rattled faintly when the wind hit just right, and the wind was doing a little waltz around the corners of the building. "Would you like water?" Mara asked. "I can't be late," Lila added so quietly that the heater almost swallowed it. Late for what? Mara poured water into a paper cone cup that always made kids watch their own drinking more carefully. "What time do you need to be somewhere?" Lila glanced again at her sleeve. She held the cup in her right hand, the arm that wasn't under guard, and her fingers left small ovals of condensation in the paper. It's, he said, "it's better if it's warm." The last word uncoiled from her like a secret that had been sitting too long. Better if it's warm. Mara's mind, a machine trained by hours and incidents, began slotting possibilities. Infections like warmth, bugs like warmth, some adhesives release in warmth, some processes, chemical ones, accelerate. But it was the shape beneath the sleeve that occupied her, that slight oblong firmness that wasn't the shape of a brace or a splint. The edge she felt wasn't fabric on skin. It was like skin over something new. "Lila," she said carefully, fingers light on the edge of her desk. "When you say he, who are you talking about?" Lila's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she pressed them together and looked toward the door again. Someone passed in the hall, and their voice leaked into the office. A social studies teacher, complaining good-naturedly about the photocopier eating the last 2 packets. The ordinary world was continuing. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. "Your parent or guardian is coming," Mara added. "We'll figure this out together." She tried a different route. "Does your arm hurt right now?" Lila shook her head. Her eyes, though, they had that depth sometimes seen in children who have had to learn grown-up navigation too soon. Quick, mapping waiting variables that should not be theirs. Mara remembered a girl 3 years ago. A different room, a different season. She remembered the precise heat and the smell of lavender dryer sheets, and how the situation had turned because she had missed the small clues. Remembering felt like a match being struck in a dark drawer. "I won't miss it," she told herself, the words silent and sworn. "Can I feel your pulse on your wrist?" Mara asked, keeping the scope of her request small. Lila hesitated, then extended her right hand. Mara put 2 fingers, not her thumb, on the radial pulse. Tap, tap, a little fast. It could be nerves, it could be fever, it could be the whole room's collective heart banging inside one girl. "Is the sleeve hurting you?" Mara asked. "Is something under there tight?" Lila swallowed. The movement of her throat looked too big for her small neck. "He says it only hurts at first," she said again. And now the words were less like a secret and more like a liturgy she had learned to say, to push away a different noise. Something clicked in Mara's mind with a small, disquieting sound, the way a latch clicks when a door is blown slightly open by a draft. The science fair posters in the hall, the word warm, the shape under the sleeve, the timing. She had glanced at the clock, counting. Some small, improbable, less terrible ideas alighted with their light feet. A self-sticking heat pack? An insect? A prank from an older sibling? But other worse ideas were there too. Heavier birds with hooked beaks. No matter which bird it was, she needed to reach. "Okay," Mara said, with the tone of someone calling a dog out from under a bed. "I'm going to put on gloves to check your arm. Just a quick look. No poking, no picking. If anything hurts, you say stop." She reached for the box of gloves. The powder-free latex slid over her hands with a little sigh. She flexed once, a habit that made the gloves fit without a tug, then stepped forward, slow as dawn. Leela watched the gloves, the way some kids watch a needle. She pressed her left elbow harder into her ribs. The heater clicked and the wind shouldered the window, with a sound like fabric being tugged. Mara stood close enough to smell Lila's jacket. The faint synthetic of the puffy material, the ghost of outside air that had slipped in with her, something that might have been cinnamon from the cafeteria oatmeal that morning. The sleeve, thicker here because the jacket was padded, gave the same almost too warm sensation it had given in the classroom. She reached again, 2 fingers along the cuff, and this time she felt the bulge shift. A tiny, deliberate shift, a tiny nestling, as if something inside was adjusting itself. Not muscle, not a spasm. It was smaller than that and more purposeful. A bead of cold prickled up Mara's spine. Objectively, she knew it could be benign. She knew it could be any number of innocent things. But the way the movement felt against her gloves, like the tiniest heart knocking, not a human heart, but the idea of heartbeat, made the air tighten around. "Leela," she murmured without moving her eyes from the sleeve. "I need you to tell me if there is anything under there that can harm you, okay?" She discovered how carefully she was preparing her mouth to say the next word. "Or anything alive." The girl's breath hitched. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head. She was very, very still. The stillness of someone who thinks any motion might break the balance of something unseen. Mara had been in this office through fevers and sprains, vomiting and migraines. A boy with a marble up his nose. A girl with a ring stuck past the knuckle so long her finger looked like a pink balloon. She had talked kids through panic attacks by having them name 5 blue things in the room, 4 things they could hear, 3 they could smell, 2 they could touch, 1 they could taste. She had once sat on the floor with a child until the bell rang, and the next, simply breathing together so a scared brain could borrow calm from a steadier one. She could do this, he would do this. But the warm shift under the sleeve hissed a message that skated under her skin. She looked at the clock on her wall. The minute hand had tipped toward the 12 now. She didn't like the feeling that there was a schedule that wasn't hers running alongside the day's ordinary schedule. "Let me see," she said, and with one hand she gathered the fabric, gentler than gentle, ready for a swift retreat if Leela protested. The girl didn't protest. She held her breath. Mara lifted the cuff an inch. The interior of the sleeve was ordinary, that grey knit of a sweater's cuff. The skin above Leela's wrist was pale but unbroken, faint purple veins threading under. The sort of skin that bruises easily but doesn't show it yet. There was nothing there, but the bulge was higher, near the crook of her elbow, under the puffy jacket layer. "I'm going to raise just the jacket part," Mara said, and untucked Lila's arm from her ribs, just enough to slide a finger under the elastic band. The movement came again, tiny, rhythmic, a faint thrumming, a sound so faint she wasn't sure. She wasn't inventing it out of the pressure of her own blood in her ears. Mara's breath stopped for 1 heartbeat, then 2. The heater clicked off. The room went very quiet. She lifted the fabric just enough to set 2 fingertips against the bulge. Whatever was under the sleeve pressed slow as checking back, as if it felt her feeling it and responded. And in that pause, poised between the known and the unknown, Mara felt something else through the padding, the hint of a seam. Plastic? the suggestion of a zipper. A zipper where a jacket had no pocket. A zipper hidden inside. Her mouth went dry as paper. She didn't let her hands move. She didn't let her face show anything but the same easy calm. But inside her chest, her heart did not care about composure. It slammed once, a heavy knocking sound she could feel all the way to her ears. The bulge shifted again. Under her fingertips there was a faint tick, 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 the same cadence as the clock, or a different rhythm, one that made her skin feel too tight. She looked up at Lila, met the girl's wide, waiting eyes, and in that instant, the room seemed to scrape an inch to the left. The light burr-barring in a way that suggested the world was gathering itself toward something. Mara's voice, when it came, sounded steady to her, astonishingly steady. In the way a bridge sounds steady as it flexes under a heavy truck. "We're going to be okay," she said, and very softly she let the sleeve fall back into place. "We're going to take this slow." But before she could step back, before she could shape the next sentence, the bulge under the sleeve made one last small movement, subtle, deliberate, as if a tiny fingertip from inside had tapped the fabric. A tiny hello, tiny warning, a tiny something. And beneath the hum of the fluorescent light, Mara heard it then, faint, impossible, and unmistakable. A rhythmic sound, softer than a moth against a lampshade, coming from within Lila's sleeve. The nurse froze, eyes flicking to the door, to the phone, to Lila's face, scanning the room, the warm light, the jar of stickers. The clock now tipping to noon as tension climbed the walls like ivy. Her fingertips stayed on the sleeve. The movement under the fabric, there and then gone, left the air quivering with the sense of an answer barely withheld. They sat like that for a moment, the room holding its breath, the heater quiet. The echo of the faint rhythmic sound slipped away, as if embarrassed to be heard. Lila's chest sank a little, a controlled descent like a small elevator. She looked at the clock again. She looked at the door. The checking, clock, door, sleeve, was a loop that caught the light differently each time, revealing the pattern for what it was, a rhythm she'd set for herself to keep something predictable in reach. "Lila," Mara said, her voice pitched soft and low, a voice the human body recognizes as the voice you use with someone who's sprained their calm. "Can we move to the cot? You can lie down. We can keep your sleeve exactly where it—" The girl's eyes went to the door one last time, stuck there as if words were pinned to the lintel. "I can't be late," she repeated. But this time she added, "We practiced at home," he said. She stopped, pressed her lips together so tightly the split in the middle blanched white. He said, "There it was again." Mara led her gently to the cot, which squeaked once as Lila's small weight settled on it. The white paper runner crackled like dry leaves. Mara set a cool cloth on Lila's forehead, and the child's eyelids came down several millimeters, the way exhausted eyes do when something finally feels like relief. The phone on Mara's desk vibrated with a brief text from the front office. Parent guardian contacted. On their way. She turned the phone face down. There were always a few minutes, sometimes 10, sometimes 30, where you floated with a child in a kind of waiting lagoon, neither here nor there, suspended. Sometimes it was enough time for a fever to declare itself, for a bellyache to become a need for a restroom, for a headache to unfurl into a migraine. Sometimes those minutes were the hinge of an entire day. "Do you want me to dim it?" Mara asked, nodding toward the floor lamp. Lila shook her head. She seemed to want to see her own hands. She seemed to want to see everyone's hands. "It's better if it's warm," she said again, almost to the ceiling. "It has to be warm." "What has to be warm?" Mara asked, letting the question hang like a ribbon for Lila to take when she could. Instead, Layla glanced at the wall clock. 12 now, straight up. The lunch bell was about to touch the air with its metallic quadrant, and she looked at the door with that same fractionally measured dread or hope. Mara still couldn't decide which it was. "We practiced," Lila said, and the word practiced came out with a carefulness that suggested rehearsal. "He said if you warm it, it doesn't. Mara felt the past raise a hand from its seat and ask to speak. She had made a mistake once, had taken a child's fear and read it only one way. The child had said, "He said it's our secret," and Mara's mind had assumed only the worst, and a report had been made, only to learn that he had been a kindly grandfather planning a surprise visit, and the secret had been a homemade puppet show behind a sheet draped in the living room. It had left a hairline crack in some family trust, and a gnash mark in Mara's confidence that she tended like an invisible scar. After that, she swore she would still err on the side of protecting the child, but she would also listen twice for the undersong of a story, would hunt for the unflashy truth hiding in the kitchen junk drawer instead of the gleaming knife. She took Leela's right hand, placed it lightly atop the puffy sleeve on Lila's left arm, and spoke carefully, because words make rooms and she needed a good room right now. If something is under there that shouldn't be, we can take it out. If there's a bug, we can help it along to a jar. She smiled with a kid-warming smile. I even have jars with tiny holes in the lid. If it's a heat pack for pain, we can check your skin. If it's anything else, we can handle anything else too. I'm here, okay? I don't scare easily. Once a student sneezed right in my mouth. She made a face that made Layla's mouth unstiffen, just a notch. I survived. The bell clanged from the hallway, a sound like a pan dropped in the cafeteria. Voices swelled outside, lunch period beginning, and the smell of yeast rolls drifted into the room like a ghost who loved butter. The heater kicked back on with a crack, and with it the room's cozy exhale returned. Lila responded to that exhale with a long, almost imperceptible one of her own. She touched the place on her sleeve again with her right fingers, and it was as if she were tapping a small door that could only open from the other side. The rhythmic sound had stopped, or rather Mara couldn't hear it anymore. She moved closer. May I? She asked, and Lila nodded, which was new, which was important. Mara put 2 fingers over the bulge. Warm, a little warmer than the rest of the sleeve. Not fever. The warmth here had a strange applied feeling, like something with its own tiny climate. Mara sat on the stool, feeling the thick cushion crackle under her. She spoke the way one speaks to a tight knot in a chain necklace, while the fingers patiently coax it free. Tell me about practicing at home. Leela looked suspicious of words. She was 8. Words were at once her friends and the unreliable transportation that can carry a person somewhere without their permission. We practiced with the kit, she said at last. But Mama made him promise it would only be the little one and only on an orange. He said it's better if it's warm, she swallowed. He said it only hurts at first. The image that flared in Mara's mind. An orange studded with tiny holes, an older boy, with a needle kit, the phrase only hurts at first, collided with the bulge under the sleeve and made a possibility that was both fright and relief. Blood sugar checks, practice needles from an EMT's kit. She had known adults who trained with oranges, who practiced with silicone pads, who talked about warming the skin so the capillaries would plump. But then what was in the sleeve? Who is he? Mara asked gently, trying not to rush the doorway of this story. My brother, Leela said, projecting the word too loudly for such a small room, as if she were throwing it like a rock to see how far it would skip. He's in 11th grade. He's in the EMT thing at the tech school. He said if you warm it, it works better. She looked at the clock again. It has to be warm. He said it only hurts at first. She repeated it now like an incantation against something bigger. Mara's shoulders lowered a notch she hadn't realized were up around her ears. Relief hovered like a bird that hadn't decided whether to land. The kit, the EMT program. Practicing on oranges, she saw the jar of stickers shining in the lamp's honey, the heater's glow, the fluttering paper snowflake she'd stuck with tape to the upper window, and it all felt very ordinary again for one half breath. But then she felt the bulge shift another micro-inch under her fingers with that odd answering push. Relief's bird flapped off. Your brother sounds very enthusiastic, Mara said neutrally, trying on plausible explanations like coats. Is your arm part of a science project? She tried to sound like she had just remembered the poster in the hall, the cheer of the blue letters. Science fair next Friday. Do you have a project for the fair? Leela didn't answer that. She stared at the sleeve as if the answers were printed on it in invisible ink. "He's good," she said. "He says I have good veins." The words were small and terrible in their precociousness. "He says I can watch." Mara's stomach folded in on itself. Her mind reaction was quick as a rabbit. Are we talking about phlebotomy? About practicing venipuncture? On an 8-year-old? No, she checked herself. Orange's silicone pad. He wouldn't. But the way children learn to say phrases they don't understand, the way they repeat what adults have told them, some of that sinks into the root of the problem. Did he practice on you? Mara asked, careful like placing a teacup on a wobbly table. Did he use a needle on you? You can tell me absolutely anything. You're not in trouble. Lila shook her head, but it was an ambivalent, elaborate shake, a no that had butt in it. Just the orange, she said. And the fake arm at school. He was laughing. He said it only hurts at first, and then you get used to it. And then if you warm the sleeve, it won't clot. Funny. The last phrase sounded like she'd borrowed a grown-up's coat, and it didn't fit too big in the shoulders. Her eyes traveled to the clock again. He said, "If I keep it warm, it'll be okay." Mara tried to swallow around the dryness in her mouth. The word clot sat like a rock in the stream of the room's air. If you keep what warm? Lila stared at the sleeve so hard that her gaze looked like it might leave a burn mark. Her right hand hovered, then descended, then hovered again. "We have to wait," she whispered and glanced at the door. Another pulse of hallway noise came and went. The ribbit of kids trading jokes, the squeal of a shoe on the waxed linoleum. "We're not late yet." Mara forced her air in slowly to keep the edges of her thoughts from fizzing. There were safe explanations, there were unsafe ones. It could be a heat pack taped over a blood draw site, but there was no blood on the visible part of the arm. It could be a contraption, they sell them for warming. It could be a prank toy. There were things that buzz and thrum, but Lila's phrase about clotting made it feel too medical. And the way the bulge had a seam, a zipper. Could this be something like a tube? Could there be a vial? The possibility appeared, absurd, real. Alongside a memory of a teenage boy coming to show off his EMT certificate last spring, the proud mother taking pictures under the Future Heroes banner. "Do you trust me?" Mara asked abruptly, surprising herself with the bluntness. Sometimes you had to stop picking at a knot and instead get one decisive tug through, because I want to help. I won't do anything without telling you first. Lila's eyes met hers, and for a second the adult lights in the room cracked, and a child's ever-present, maybe tears shone through. Then she nodded, a tiny nod, and put her right hand atop the bulge like making a pact. A quiet, almost unnoticeable sound came from the sleeve then. Just a breath of whir like the smallest motor concluding a task. Then silence again. Mara had an impulse to call the principal right that second. She had an impulse to call 911 without waiting. She had an impulse to do everything at once and nothing. Stay in this soft light room and talk about stickers instead. She remembered the mistake, the time she had blown a family's trust like dandelion fluff. And she remembered another time. She had hesitated and paid for it in nightmares for weeks. She split the difference. The safest difference she could find in the moment. "We're going to have a grown-up conversation with your mom when she gets here," she said. "And if anyone has put you in danger, we can bring in people who keep kids safe. But I also know sometimes things look like something they're not." Lila didn't look reassured. She looked tired. The tired that comes not from running but from carrying something heavy inside. He said not to tell, she said. And then, very quickly, like she had to get the words out before they melted. But he didn't mean it like that. He meant because it's a surprise. It's for the... She stopped. The heater exhaled. The window shook when a gust hit. She pressed her lips together again and looked at the door for the 1000th time. The office door opened. The principal, Ms. Howe, appeared in the frame with the practiced poise of someone whose shoes always clicked near power. She had that kindly sternness that elementary principals cultivate like a greenhouse plant. She took in the scene. Leela on the cot, Mara kneeling, the warm lamp, the gloves, and she stepped in, closed the door behind her, and lowered her voice. "I called her mother," she said, and gave a small nod as if to say, "And she's coming fast." "How fast?" Leila asked, surprising both adults. "As fast as a speed limit," Miss Howe said with a brief smile that didn't dent the seriousness in her eyes. She looked at Mara, question marks like birds perched on her eyebrow. Mara gave her a micro shake of the head. "Not now, not with the child watching." "We're okay," Mara said to Leila, and she meant it in the way that means we're not okay yet. "But I will stand between you and the not okay until you are. Do you want Miss Howe to sit with us? She has a daughter who makes the best cinnamon rolls in town, and might share one with me if I brag enough." The principal huffed a tiny laugh. "Might is doing a lot of work there." She looked at Leela. "May I sit?" She lowered herself to a chair by the desk and folded her hands, not reaching for the cot, not letting the weight of her attention land too heavily on the child. They waited like that. Lunch period swirled outside. A plow truck coughed somewhere, early for snow. But the rumor was that the first flurries would drag their lace across town by late afternoon. The office's small clock polished its ticks with smug consistency. Mara kept her fingers near the sleeve, not on it, the way one keeps a hand near the rail when walking down steep stairs. Then it came, a noise so faint she almost missed it, except that she was tuned entirely to this one frequency now. A rhythmic sound from the sleeve, not a heart, not a bug's flutter, a soft, repetitious chuff, like something tiny inflating and deflating, like, absurdly, like a miniature pump completing a cycle and then resting. She slid her eyes to Miss Howe, and in that glance a conversation happened without words. The principal's pupils tightened. She had heard it too. Mara felt a second presence in the room that wasn't a person. It was the memory of instructions, the ghost of a manual being read by some older brother, the bullet list a teacher had handed out to students in an EMT program. Warmth, time, pressure, release. "He says it only hurts at first," Leila whispered once more, her voice cotton thin with fatigue. Mara stood, moved to her desk, and picked up the phone. Her voice remained steady. "Front office? When her mother arrives, please bring her straight here." She hung up gently, as if noise could break something. Leela turned her face toward the door. "I can't be late," she repeated, but now the words had less fear in their bones and more commitment. She had been promised something. She had been recruited into someone's plan. She was trying to keep up her end of the deal. "You won't be," Mara said. "Whatever this is, we'll make sure it goes the right way." She turned back, about to ask another careful question. Perhaps about the Brothers MT's program teacher's name. Perhaps about the science fair project details. When the office hallway exploded with louder voices and the quick rubbery beat of boots. The door opened to reveal a woman whose hair was wind-tossed with November, and whose eyes were that kind of worried that has a coat of defensiveness thrown over it. She was breathing as if she'd jogged the last few steps. She probably had. She looked younger than her worry, older than her jacket, a woman built by nights of too late laundry and early buses, her presence full of magnets that pulled blame and guilt to wrong pole. She halted, saw Leila, saw the sleeve under the child's own guarding hand, and her face underwent a series of expressions so quickly that Mara could almost see the edges blur. Relief, alarm, puzzlement, calculation, and something like shame. "Leela," the woman said, and her voice cracked as if the name were a stick thrown across a chasm, and she hoped it would make a bridge. "Baby." "What? What?" The principal stood, hand outstretched. "Miss Hale, I'm Principal Howe. Thank you for coming so quickly. Nurse Mara wanted to talk to you about." It's okay," the mother said reflexively, then swallowed it down, then said it again as if "it's okay" might be a key to a lock that didn't fit. "She's fine." She addressed Leila with a smile that trembled like a plate on a countertop with a washer off balance. "Aren't you fine, Bug? It's okay." Mara wanted to respect the mother's need to decide when to explain, but she also needed to rule out harm. "We'd like to look at her arm," she said in the tone that says, This is a request and a necessity. She's refusing, and she's warm to the touch, and she was about to say there's a rhythmic sound when the mother flinched almost imperceptibly. A flinch like a guilty reflex, a flinch like someone had said the secret out loud. "We're not late," Lila said, this time with a tiny note of triumph that was bizarrely heartbreaking. "We kept it warm." The mother's eyes slid closed as if she were bracing for a wave. "Honey," she said to the child, but more to the room where we practiced. "We were supposed to—" She looked at Mara and stopped herself before something unwise leapt from her mouth. "She's fine," she said again, and it sounded like a lie that wished it could be true, or the truth that knew it didn't sound right. "Nurse Mara is here to make sure," the principal said, a Swiss Army knife of compassion and authority in 5 words. The mother nodded, swallowing against the catch in her throat. She hovered at the cot, wanting to take her child's hand, but pausing as if any touch could trigger an event she wasn't ready for. "Bug," she said softly, "it's time." Lila's eyes lit at that word like a tiny lantern had been lit behind them. The principal's gaze darted to Mara. "Time. Time for what?" "Miss Hale," Mara said, her voice pitched low so it wasn't a public address to the room. "I'm going to ask you something directly. Is there an object under your daughter's sleeve? Is it—" She swallowed, choosing words like careful stepping stones, part of a demonstration, a science, something. The mother blushed, a sharp, fast flare that made her seem suddenly younger. She looked at the door, at the window, at her daughter's hand on the sleeve. Her jaw tensed. "I can explain," she said, but her mouth made the words like a student stretching for an answer that the teacher expects. "I can explain, but I don't know if I can explain well." "Explain by showing," the principal suggested gently. "And if we need to talk after, we will." For a second, the mother's eyes met Mara's and widened, as if a small alarm clock had gone off inside her head. Something kindled there. Recognition? Mara felt something shift within her too. A small buried drawer opening on its own. The mother's face was familiar, not through daily repetition but through deep memory. The kind that isn't a face so much as a way of standing, a tilt of a smile under stress, an old hallway, a different school. A night where a child cried because of fever, and a nurse came to a house with a bag of tricks and a calm voice. Mara's breath drew in as the mother reached for the sleeve. "Not yet," the principal said, raising a hand. "First, I want to be clear. If there's a medical issue, we may need to call 911. If there's a safety issue, we will." "It's okay," the mother said. But now it was less a magic, and more a support beam she wished she'd measured twice before cutting. "It's okay. It's okay." Mara moved closer, gloved hands ready to help. She could smell the mother's hair, wind and grocery store apples, and the paper bag funk of a purse that's lived many lives. She could smell fear, the kind that's in the breath when a parent realizes they may have misjudged an adult thing while trying to be brave for a child. The mother rested her hand on the zipper that wasn't supposed to be there. Through the room's hush, the rhythmic thrum from the sleeve came again, a little louder with the mother's touch. It ran a short sequence, a pattern like a sigh, and then quieted as if listening too. "Okay," the mother said, voice shaking enough that the word wobbled. "Open it, Bug." Lila hooked a tiny fingernail under the hidden zipper pull through the jacket fabric. Mara leaned in, eyes narrowing to catch any sign of trouble, body poised to pull away if something spat or sparking appeared. Then from inside the sleeve, the faintest rhythmic sound returned. Sharper now, nearly polite in its insistence. Chuff, 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 a sound like a miniature bellows whispering to itself, keeping time with the clock somewhere unseen. The zipper paused halfway, teeth bared like a revealed secret, and everything in the room leaned toward the sound without physically moving. The people, the lamp, even the jar of stickers seemed to angle itself. The mother, who had retracted her hand as if to yield the reveal to her daughter, stepped back another half-foot. Her boots made the tiniest squeak on the tile. Her eyes were threaded with bloodshot lines, as if the drive over had been spent arguing with herself in a voice so fierce it hurt. Lila's fingers, small, chapped at the sides from winter, worried the zipper pull but didn't yank. She stole another glance at the clock. He said it should be warm for at least an hour first, she murmured, almost reverent. The heater made a small coughing sound and stilled again, as if to avoid stealing any of the room's attention from the next beat of the story. "Hail," the principal began, using the tone she reserved for parents who sat too straight and spoke too fast in meetings. "What precisely are we looking at?" The mother's gaze moved from Lila to the principal to Mara, then back to Lila. As if orienting herself in a triangle she'd suddenly found herself standing in the middle of. She tried on a few sentence starters, then chose the simplest. "It's a science project," she said. We're doing blood typing for the fair. Demonstration harmless. It's all harmless." She rushed to add, "Everything's clean, sterile. We researched. She cut herself off with a breath that whipped the ends of her hair. We tried to be careful." Mara went very still. "Blood typing." The phrase dropped into the quiet like a coin. Children, vials, warmth, the bulge under the sleeve. The humming sound like a small pump. "What kind of demonstration?" she asked, keeping emotion out of the words, letting them be simple containers. The mother's eyes darted again to the door, as if checking for judgment that might be walking down the hall in sensible heels. Just the reactions," she said. "The agglutination, little drops on a card." She watched videos. Her brother. "He's in the EMT program and he wanted to help, and I said only if it's safe, only if we use. She faltered. "I didn't want to ask the clinic because last time they were busy and..." "It was supposed to be simple," he said, her voice thin to an apologetic wire. He said it only hurts at first. The words fell out of her as if saying them had less to do with relaying a quote and more to do with opening a pressure valve in the room. Mara felt herself wading into the current of a past she had avoided wading into for a long time. There had been a clinic once, late night, short-staffed, a mother who had walked in with a child and a question, and the nurse, Mara, who had handled it with a firmness the mother had not forgiven. She recognized the tone now in the woman's voice, a rectangular pride. The defensiveness arced like a shield, and behind it the worry. The worry was the true shape, the rest was a costume. "You're using real blood." The principal's voice had a sudden steel line through it. "In school," the mother flinched. Not from anyone else," she said quickly. It was just a tiny bit. From her." She gestured toward Lila with a small, helpless palm up, as if offering a salt shaker at a diner. Then she met Mara's eyes, and the recognition bloomed between them fully now, a tree sprouting in second. "You," she said, too softly for the principal to catch it. "From the clinic, you're the one who..." She cut it off, swallowed, recalibrated. When she spoke again, she had resumed the higher, brittle register. "Look, I know how this looks, but she's okay, she's fine. Please don't make this into... We live in a town where people speak. And I'm telling you, she's okay, she was brave. It was a finger prick. We did it last night. Her brother sterilized everything. He read the sheet." Last night," Mara repeated, calibrating. "The warmth in the sleeve. An hour at least. The hidden zipper. The rhythmic sound. What's under her sleeve, Miss Hale?" The mother swallowed. She pushed hair behind her ear. Her hands shook, and it made a whisper noise in the room like a very small rain. "The warmer," she said at last. The word a confession and a defense at once. "We made a sleeve warmer. We stitched it in. It's a thermal thing he had for keeping rue bags warm. It's very low, gentle. She lifted her chin as if daring the world to call it what it was. "We wanted the vial warm. For the demonstration, warm blood shows the reactions better." He said it only hurts at first, meaning the finger prick, not. She shut her eyes. "We meant well, silence, but not the empty kind. The kind that's thick with thoughts brushing shoulders." Layla's eyes had brightened at the word demonstration. At last, she was in a story she understood. "We're going to show how the drops make little clumps if the type is the same," she said, and her mouth made the word clumps with grim concentration, the way a scientist might in a documentary. A, B, abe. See its letters. Mama says letters can be blood too. We kept it warm. She touched the sleeve with pride, affection even, affection for a job done with someone she loved. Mara breathed in once through her nose, slow. The smell of antiseptic from the glove box climbed to meet her. The room swayed again to the wind's shoulder on the glass. The mother's explanation was suddenly like a skin over a skeleton of worry in Mara's mind. It made sense. It made the worst possibility melt, but it also made a new worry solidify. Vials in school, warmth against skin, devices under sleeves. And the phrase, "He says it only hurts at first," when coming from an older brother even in context, was a sentence you had to wrap in sun and reassure while gently relocating its thorns. "Ms. Hale," the principal said, leaning forward, fingers steepled, voice very even. "Do you understand why we're concerned?" "Yes." The mother's voice cracked right on the S, and she grabbed it back, sanded it into a straighter sound. "Yes, I understand, but she's fine. It was just a finger prick and a tiny vial. The warmer is..." She glanced at Mara and then at her daughter. "I didn't want her carrying glass in her backpack where it could break. So she swallowed, and a tear slipped off her lower lid fast as something escaping. "We stitched a pocket inside. He found a little warmer pack that's used for baby's milk, I think. Don't look at me like that." She snapped at herself more than anyone. "We lined it. It's safe to touch. It's low heat. You could hold it all day. It's like a hand warmer, really. She broke off, the words tripping over themselves. It sounds worse out loud, but in the kitchen last night it sounded smart. It sounded like a way to do something right for once. Mara watched the sentence for once, land heavy between them. She glanced at Leela, whose fingers, still on the zipper, had drawn tiny moons into her own skin. The principal's voice softened a notch, kept its backbone. "We could have provided supervision and materials here," she said. "We have science protocols." The mother's mouth flattened into the same defensive determinism that some people use like a winter coat. Better to be too warm than to let cold into the bones. "We don't always have access," she said. "The clinic is, and the forms." And he was so proud of his kit, and I was so proud of them both. And it was late, and we were laughing, and she didn't cry. She looked at Lila with a sudden ferocious love that caught on a burr of self-blame. She didn't cry. She said she wanted to do it right because Ms. Patel had said celebrate the process, and he said it only hurts at first. She laughed then, a small, helpless sound at the ceiling. I heard him say it and I thought, God, that sounds so terrible, but I let it burn off in the air. I didn't catch it and take it out of his mouth. Mara put a hand out, palm up, a small offering. "Okay," she said. "Okay. This is what we're going to do. We're going to look. We're going to make sure there's no risk to Leela. We are going to take the warmer off, because it doesn't belong under a sleeve at school. And we are going to secure any vial because glass and kids and hallways are a love story that never ends well. And then we're going to have some conversations." The mother nodded tightly, gratefully, guiltily. She edged closer to the cot. Leela looked between them, uncertain whether she had done something heroic or something wrong. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, and the words were so small in the room that even the stickers seemed to lean in to hear. "No," Mara said, and that one word had in it all the times a child had been told they were the problem, when really the problem was perching on a shelf above their heads, disguised as adult good intentions. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble." The mother's shoulders fell a fraction, a tiny collapse of a tent that had been pitched too tightly. Mara saw the line of exhaustion under her eyes like thumb smudges, saw the scars of choices that had been chewed through. The recognition of the clinic night was there too. Her face that had been younger then, the same crease between her brows, the same stubborn, protective set of her jaw. Mara had been the one to refuse something that night. A request for an antibiotic without exam. Or maybe it had been a request to take home sharps. She remembered a voice rising, a door opening, a child crying. She had thought about it many times. This was the same woman. The town wasn't that big. The past had a way of looping back with a muttered "excuse me" as it squeezed by. I'm going to ask you to step back just a step, the principal said. And she did, and the room seemed to recollect itself in the slight rearrangement of human furniture. Ready? Mara asked Leela. The girl nodded, taking her mother's nod into herself like a transferred bravery. She moved the zipper slowly, and as the hidden lining peeled open, the warmer's interior revealed itself in the honey lamp light. A tiny sewn pocket, neatly stitched with the clumsy pride of a family project, and inside a soft pouch radiating gentle heat. Next to it, nested like a chick, was a small vial. Glass, yes, but capped with a secure top. The vial was settled inside a ring of foam, the foam itself sewn in place so it wouldn't wander. Warmth breathed from the pocket, not rash hot but a steady human hand warmth. The rhythmic sound resolved itself now that the fabric no longer muffled it. A compact, battery-powered pulse warmer, most likely repurposed, as the mother had said, from a baby bottle kit or a medical supply for home use. Its soft chuff every minute wrestled no threat from the air. It sounded almost apologetic about existing. Mara felt the wave of relief wash over her blood like a sudden softness in iron. She had prepared for sharp, for dangerous, for the awful. She had also prepared for this, a homemade attempt at cleverness, in a house where resources sometimes meant reinventing with duct tape what the world sold in tidy boxes. She reached in careful, feeling the pouch's warmth on her glove. It made the latex balmy. The vial, carefully nested, was labeled with a small sticker and a messy pen scrawl that might have been Leela O. The letters were smudged with pride and haste. Why didn't you tell us? The principal asked. And the question carried the weight of many other not-tellings over the years, the ones that had required mops or apologies or police or hugs. Because last time, the mother began, then stopped. She looked at Mara, then at the principal, then finally at her daughter. Her hands opened and closed by her sides, remembering something they had once carried. She swallowed and tried again. Because last time I asked for help, I felt judged. I thought if we did it like this, it would be okay, and I could let them be proud just once, without someone telling us we did it backwards or wrong or poor. The last word was so quietly said it almost asked for permission to exist in the room. Mara looked down at the vial again, and the warmth of it hit her heart in some secret place. This was dangerous, yes. There were protocols for a reason. But this was also a kind of love. The clumsy, complicated kind that got itself into messes, while trying to make a child's face light up at a folding table in a gym full of projects with store-bought parts. Thank you for telling us, Mara said. We're going to do this right now. We'll take the warmer off your arm, Leela, and we'll put the vial in a safe container. And after that, we'll talk about how to present your project without anything that attaches to your body. You can still do the demonstration, but there are ways to do it that don't involve this. She gestured gently at the sleeve pocket. Okay? Leela nodded, willing. The relief in her small shoulders was so sudden and complete, it was like watching a bird find a branch. It was about to be over. This small crisis mouse that had scurried into an elephant's shadow. When the principal, who had been quiet and thoughtful and perhaps calculating consequences, straightened and spoke with authority. Before we remove anything, I need to be very clear. We also must consider policy. A device sewn into clothing that contains a warmer and a glass vial, in a classroom, that was not approved. She looked at the mother, and her eyes were not hard, but they were unsmiling. We have to document, and because it involves blood, we may need to notify the district nurse and depending medical personnel, just to ensure safety. The mother's face crumpled in an instant, defensive armor rising. She's fine, she said again, but it had the sound of a plea now. Please don't make this. We didn't mean, we were just. She's fine. Mara felt the moment teeter. She reached out, put a gloved hand gently over the mother's bare knuckles. This is about procedure, she said, voice like warm tea poured into a cold mug. Not about blame, we can call for guidance. It's just in case of what? The mother asked, Her eyes shone with the righteous demand of someone who has had enough of the phrase "just in case" used to keep people like her on the polite side of a line. In case of us being us, in case of anything we can't see, Mara said, and she let her eyes slide to the vial. The warmer, the sleeve, the child, including your daughter's safety. She squeezed the mother's hand once, an invisible code. I remember, I'm not your enemy. The principal nodded, decision reached. Nurse Mara, call 900, and as she said softly but decidedly, frame it as a consult. We need a check. And the district nurse. There it was, the tilt into official. Lila's mouth parted. She looked at her mother with fear fresh and new. The mother's shoulders stiffened, jaw set. Mara lifted the first. Her finger hovered over the 9, like it hovered over the final bead in a rosary. Not from superstition, but from a brief, noble wish that the world could be finished with kindness instead of protocols. She dialed. The ring barely started before the mother's knee bounced jittery, and the sleeve zipper, under Lila's nervous hand, slid another half-inch on its own momentum. The warmer's faint chuffing came through bright and distinct, each soft puff a gentle insistence that matched the slow thud of the principal's measured heart in the room, matched the quick snare drum patter of the mother's, matched Mara's steady beat as she spoke into the line. This is the school nurse at Tilden Elementary. We have a child with a warming device sewn into a sleeve containing a small blood vial for a science demonstration. She is stable. We'd like a precautionary consult. On the cot, unaware of the ballet of adult systems stepping toward each other, Leela held the zipper, looked at the clock and whispered, almost as if to soothe the device and herself at once. He says it only hurts at first. The dispatch operator's voice came through calm and competent, a cadence hammered into shape by hundreds of calls ranging from catsup trees to hearts on floors. Copy. Child stable. No active bleeding. You have the device contained. The words were wrapped in a level rankness that steadied the room, even as it made the mother tense like a bow. Yes, Mara said, then looked at the sleeve's open edge. Warm halo, tiny device chuffing, zipper teeth like a guarded smile. Contained and visible. We just need clearance to remove it safely and secure the vial. The principal wrote notes on a pad with the fervor of a scribe in a monastic cell. Ms. Hale, the mother, kept trying to sit still and failing. Every few seconds she twitched, the kinetic energy of guilt and fear making lightning under her skin. Her mouth kept forming words and then swallowing them. Back then, in the clinic, she had been the same. Sentences that were swords until they realized they would cut her own hand. The operator spoke. An EMT unit is 2 minutes out. We'll have them look and assist. A pause. Then the kind voice that sometimes leans out at the official to say something human and tell the little one she's being very brave. Did you say her brother is in EMT training? Mara glanced at the mother who was biting her lip. Yes, she said simply. Then you tell her the pros are on the way to say hi, the operator said. The ridiculousness of that, framed as a reward, was exactly the kind of ridiculousness that worked on 8-year-olds and adults, who secretly are 8-year-olds under bills. As she hung up, a hallway wave pushed against the door. Laughter, someone's phone playing a snatch of song, lockers slamming. The normal world drummed its fingers against the crisis window and reminded it that lunch was halfway done. Leela's eyes were pinned to the clock with the intensity of someone telegraphing a message to time. She looked down at the sleeve with a proprietary little frown. We're not late, she said again. We have to warm it for the clumps to show on the card. Mara softened at the earnestness. We will still do science, she promised, just not with your sleeve on as a lab bench. She smiled, and it put a little light in the mother's face, like a candle catching on a wick that had looked damp. Then the zipper eased lower, not a deliberate pull. Gravity teamed with fidgeting. A sliver more of the inner pocket showed. There, beside the soft pouch, was a glimpse of something else, tucked deeper, nearly hidden by the foam circle's curve. The edge of a card folded in half, speckled with what looked like dried drops. A tiny plastic pipette nibbed like a bird's beak peeped from under the foam too. It was a miniature lab, under a child's sleeve. On a Thursday, Mara felt a swoop of sadness, affectionate exasperation and awe. The ingenuity here was astonishing. The risk. How many mothers and brothers had sat at a kitchen table with a fabric sleeve turned inside out, a needle and thread, a scavenged warmer, a little foam, and a lot of willpower, and made something that worked, almost too well. She had seen this before in other forms, inhalers turned into nebulizers, backpacks into meal kits, broken things fixed with household tape and bravery. The principal saw the card too. That, she said, must be removed now. It wasn't debate. It was a chord the school played when policy had the melody. The mother nodded as if grateful to be told what to do. Her hand came forward hovering. Then she pulled it back. "Can I?" she asked Mara, who, despite being the authority here, nodded for the mother to do it, because sometimes dignity requires letting the person who built the mess also unbuild it. But she hovered close, ready. "Bug," the mother said to Lila, and the endearment trembled like a string on a guitar plucked in a cold room. "We're going to take it off now, okay? You did amazing." Lila nodded, teeth worrying her bottom lip. "We're not late," she said again, as if to bless the act with a passage from a sacred text. The zipper descended with a soft sound, like a whisper being let out of a closet. The warmer's edge exposed itself fully. A brand logo that had been carefully scratched away with something abrasive, so the teacher wouldn't see it and ask questions, perhaps. Or maybe to hide that it had been obtained in a way that wasn't strictly by the book. The tiny pump, a little more visible now, made a last apologetic puff. A knock at the office door, then it opened a crack. The custodian stuck his head in, saw the room's arrangement, saw the mother's eyes, saw the principal's posture, the gloves on Mara's hands, the inner life of a jacket sleeve, and offered in a low, respectful voice, "Ambulance is here." His eyes went to the little girl and warmed. "They look like Christmas lights from the street," he told her. "You get to be the reason for the lights." Lila smiled despite the tightness around her mouth. She had never been the reason for Christmas lights before, except that one time she'd plugged them in too early in November, and her mother had laughed and said, Okay, let's break the rules just this once." And they ate popcorn on the couch, and the room felt like a tiny church. 2 EMTs entered, faces open and kind, boots damp with a few drops of the season's first try at snow. They smelled like car heater air and winter and coffee. The taller one had a small sticker on his uniform that a kindergartner had clearly given him, rainbow unicorn with a helmet. The shorter one crouched immediately to Lila's eyeline. "Hey," she said, voice sprightly, as if this were a casual visit and not an official step. "We heard you're doing science." Lila nodded with solemn pride. "We need it warm." "Warm is friendly for drops," the MT said, "but sometimes warm is unfriendly for skin, so we're going to make sure it didn't make any grumpy spots." "Is that cool?" She offered the back of her gloved hand for a tap, and Lila tapped it as if stamping a passport. The taller EMT glanced at Mara and the principal, quick scan of the facts baked in. "We heard vial of blood and warming device sewn into sleeve," he said, humming with a practiced competence. "Plan? Remove safely," Mara said. "Secure the vial." She gestured toward the mother. "She constructed it. She should be the one to take it off, with our help." The EMT nodded, respectful of that choice. "We'll monitor," the taller one said, and pulled out a small handheld device, the kind that can read oxygen and pulse through a finger. The shorter one rolled out a narrow bandage and a little square of gauze, just in case the skin under the warmer had some complaint to lodge with the world. "Bug," the mother said again, and now the word had steadier music. Now her fingers dipped into the sleeve pocket, moving around the little foam ring. She pinched the warmer's pouch, feeling its steady, low heat. It was like taking a chick out of an egg without cracking the shell. It required patience, care, and some stifled swearing at physics. The inside of the sleeve was a tiny geography. Foam Hill, Warmer Valley, Glass Lake, Vial, Pipette, Bird. The zipper gave them the path. The mother worked slowly, narrating for her own courage. "I'm lifting the warmer. Nurse Mara is holding the sleeve. You're doing great. What kind of clumps do we want to see on the card?" "Little ones," Lila said, But her voice was far away, watching her own arm like it belonged to a study on someone's clipboard. Not big ones, tiny ones, the MT agreed, like baby sheep. That produced the first real laugh in 20 minutes. A sneeze of a laugh from Lila that made the corner of the room smile. Then there, just there, a glimpse of skin under the place where the warmer had been pressed through the fabric. It was pinker than the rest, but not angry, not blistered. The EMT placed the cold pad of her instrument on Lila's finger. "Just a little squeeze," she murmured, and the machine read out crisp numbers that sounded very satisfying when the taller EMT said them out loud. "Pulse a little fast, but that tracks. Oxygen fine. Temperature." He held the device a respectful distance from the sleeve and took an infrared read. Slightly elevated at skin, but well within safe range. "Okay," he looked at Mara. "We're good to proceed." The mother extracted the warmer. It slipped free with a sigh that might have been imagined, but nevertheless felt like a room exhaling. The vial nestled there revealed, small, capped, safe. The principal leaned forward, fascinated despite herself. "That is," she started, then struggled for the right word, the one that could hold both admiration and disapproval. "Ingenious," she settled on, and it came out as a compliment despite her best efforts to put a scolding edge on it. "And not allowed." "Understood," the mother said, and her gratitude for being allowed that one compliment made her eyes glisten again. She pinched the vial delicately, gloves on at Mara's insistence, and lifted it free of its foam cradle. The light coming through the window struck the glass, and for a second the little cylinder glowed, the red inside singing the pure note of life that blood sings when the world pauses to notice it. "There we go," Mara said, soft as a bedtime. "Okay, we'll secure." The shorter EMTs handed her a small, hard plastic case, the kind designed to survive being dropped from a truck bed, and Mara placed the vial inside. She snapped the case shut. The sound was definitive in a way that made everyone's shoulders drop a notch. The pipette bird got tucked into a specimen bag. The little card was put in a second one. The warmer, the creature that had hummed so politely, was lifted out, its cord coiled and placed in a third. The girl's arm, released from its secret duty, looked so small that something ached in Mara, a low hum that lived under her ribs. She looked at the inner part of the elbow. No punctures, no bruises, no sign of anything but the gentle blush of heat pressed through fabric. The EMT dabbed a cool pad over it. Lila winced only because someone was looking at her as she winced, and that sometimes is reason enough. A collective breath. The sound of it made the room feel like a balloon that had been stretched to its limit and then let go just before the snap. The principal, hard plastic case in hand, squared her shoulders toward the mother. "We will need to document," she said again, but her voice had less lecture and more relief in it now. "And tomorrow, you and I will go over science fair rules. There are, you'll be unsurprised to learn, regulations about bodily fluids." "I'm entirely unsurprised," the mother said with a ghost of humor. "I'm only surprised no one was hurt." The sentence hung there, a landing place for remorse and narrowly avoided consequences. She added, quieter, "To Mara, thank you." Mara nodded and felt the word land somewhere. She had kept empty for apologies that had never found the right shape to fill it. She opened her mouth to say, "I remember you," to bring the clinic night into the light, to say what had been unsaid for too long. But just then, because timing has a wicked sense of humor, the zipper, loosened and unmoored, slid further down by the pull of gravity and revealed one last thing. A tiny little zippered compartment inside the lining of the lining, a Russian doll of pockets. "What's that?" the taller MT said, curiosity a stable baseline in his voice. He leaned in. The mother blinked. That's just... Her face went blank as if searching her memory's pantry for a name for the spice she smelled. "That's the other pocket for the card. For the... I think he put the..." She reached in. Her fingers encountered something small, plastic. She grasped and withdrew, a zipper, a tiny key fob. The sort that might turn on a little battery component or unlock a child-proof cap. But attached to it, tucked under the fold, was the corner of a photograph. She slid it out, surprised. It was a picture of Leela and her brother at the kitchen table, the same sleeve turned inside out between them, both laughing, the boy's mouth open mid-story, the date stamp of last night glowing orange in the corner. The mother made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He wanted her to have it for the board, she said, as if the discovery were both wonderful and terrible, proof and exoneration in one. A siren, very soft now that the vehicle was parked, slid down the hall in their ears as if it had taken the elevator. The custodian, standing in the doorway, said quietly, "Snow's starting." The words settled in the air like powder. Everyone turned to the window and saw it. The first flakes, lazy and unspecific, thinking about whether they wanted to commit to winter. Mara looked back at the sleeve, at the seam they had revealed. The room had lightened as though the weather had put a lamp under the day. Everyone's face looked softer. She was about to say, "We're all set," when the principal, who had not lost her grip on the recipe of procedure that had to be followed exactly, tapped the hard plastic case that held the vial and said, "I'll take this to the office safe." She glanced at the mother. "You'll sign it out when you pick it up, with directions about presenting it properly, not on your person." The mother nodded, chastened and relieved. "Before you go," the taller AMT said, "we just want to check one more thing." He looked at Mara. "Okay, if we peek under the sweater now that the warmer is off, just to be absolutely sure there's no adhesive or tape pulling at skin." Mara looked at the mother. The mother looked at Leela. The three of them formed an axis of permission. Leela surprised them all by sighing. Not a tired sigh, but the sigh of someone done with suspense. "It's okay," she said in a tiny, bureaucratic tone. "We can check." Mara lifted the sweater's edge just a touch, the way you lift a curtain to see if the rain has stopped. There was nothing, just the ordinary landscape of a child's arm. But in that tiny lifted fold for less than a second something flashed at the inner hem, a glint of metal so quick it might have been nothing. Mara paused, leaned closer. It wasn't metal. It was the small tooth of a zipper's end, one they had already seen. She laughed at herself in a breath. "I think we have enough zippers for today," she said lightly. They all smiled. The pent-up curve of lips released. That smile felt like a good place to stand. And then from the hallway another voice entered the doorframe. An older boy, tall, gangly hair in the exact halfway stage between overgrown and purposeful. He wore a jacket with a patch. EMT student. He had run from wherever he had been, the tech school down the block, because he appeared in the doorway with the particular breath of someone who has tried very hard not to run in a hall nonetheless. He was pale with worry, bright with youth. "Leela," he blurted. "I came as soon as I didn't mean to. I was going to come for lunch. He stopped when his eyes took in the two EMT, one of whom gave him a little salute that said, "Welcome to the club, kid." The mother's face went through another flicker book of looks. Pride, fury, relief, exasperation, love. She managed Peter in a tone that was all of them at once. Peter's gaze tumbled to his sister's arm, then to the case in the principal's hand. His jaw worked. "It was my idea," he said, both confessing and boasting. "She wanted to show it right. I showed her how to warm the sleeve like they told us for." He stopped, looked at the EMT, looked at the adults, adjusted. "Like they told us for reasons. We read all the safety stuff. We did the finger prick last night. She didn't even cry." He looked at Lila, with the worshipful awe older brothers sometimes reserve for sisters whose bravery embarrasses them with its clarity. "She didn't even cry." The principal nodded once, acknowledging the confession. "And you put a warming device and a glass vial in a jacket your sister wore to school," she said, each noun carefully placed like bricks. Peter opened and closed his mouth, trying to pass how to accept the scolding while holding on to his belief that it had been brilliant. "Yes," he said, small now. We thought it would be okay if we watched. If it was warm, because he says," he stopped, embarrassed. The EMTs with the unicorn sticker grinned. "Because someone told you it only hurts at first," the taller EMT supplied, not unkindly. "Yep," he looked at Peter's "Tech school, huh? Good program." Peter bobbed his head, proud. Best, he said, then darted a guilty look at his sister. I shouldn't have said. I meant with the orange. I meant I didn't. It's okay, Mara said, really meaning it this time. It's okay, she gestured to the warmer on the table. This was ingenious and not allowed. And we're going to put our heads together to make sure your sister can still present her project in a way that makes all the grown-ups nod and none of them call 911. Deal? Peter's relief was so complete it made him skitter like a coat. Deal. Good, the principal said, with the tone that meant the end of a hearing and the beginning of probation. She picked up the case. I'll return this after school with protocols. For now, Miss Hale, if you can stay for a moment, we'll finish the paperwork. Nurse Mara, MT. Thank you. She looked at Lila, and her face softened, its muscles releasing their stern hold. And you, young scientist, will come by my office later to choose a ribbon for bravery. Leela smiled, and even the exhausted lines in her face looked like they forgave the light for arriving late. She looked down at her jacket sleeve, now loose and empty, and patted it, like one pats a pet that has had a long day. She whispered almost to herself and the zipper, and perhaps to the ghost of the device. We did. They were all about to disperse. Crisis deconstructing itself into anecdotes, when the quieter thing that had been trying to catch up to Mara finally did. She looked at Miss Hale, the mother. We've met before, she said softly, at the clinic years ago. It was late. Your daughter had a fever and you asked for... She trailed off and saw the recognition blow across the other woman's face, like fog across a field. The lollipops, the mother finished, and her voice had a different shape now. Wry, human, not defensive. You wouldn't give us 3. You said 1 was enough. And I said something about how rules get made for people who don't need things, and you asked me to sit and I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mara said too, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with Candy. The mother's eyes glistened again, but this time the tears felt like an unclenching. Okay, the taller EMT said, clapping his hands softly as if dusting off the end of an act. We're good here. He looked at Peter, at Leela, at the mother. See you in a few years, kid, he said to Peter, nodding at the patch. On our side of the call, Peter straightened, flexing the future in his mind. As the MT left and the custodian closed the door, the room regained its ordinary shape, the lamp's honey light, warming the last edges of what had been a cold fear. The zipper on Lila's sleeve dangled peacefully. Not a mouth, not a secret door, just a zipper again. The heater hummed on, the snow on the window glass thickened like fingerprint dust. The clock, pleased with its performance, ticked. They would have left it there, almost resolved, almost explained. If not for the mother's phone vibrating on the desk with a message that made her mouth become a line again. She read, she smiled, and said to Mara, "It's from my sister. She's asking if the snow is sticking at our place yet." She laughed quietly, the laughter of someone whose window has been thrown open by a breeze they didn't know they needed. She says she's making soup. She says, "Come get some." The word soup entered the room like a promise. But before they could all taste the imaginary broth, before the paperwork was done, and the case was keyed into its temporary home, and the boy was shooed back to class, and the girl was promised a ribbon, the sleeve, loosened by the session, gave up one more tiny sound, a zip's faint purr as the last tooth settled. It was a small sound, but placed at the end of everything, it rang like a bell. Everyone looked at it, just for a beat, as if half expecting a rabbit to leap out of the hat after the magician had already taken his bow. After the EMT left, the room filled with that peculiar quiet of an aftermath. Like the stage air just after the curtain falls, the principal moved into paperwork mode, the rustle of forms and the precise click of a pen. Miss Hale sat at the desk, the strain in her face being ironed out by relief, one line at a time. Leela perched on the cot's sleeve, now a harmless puddle around her wrist, and watched the snow decide itself more confidently outside. Peter stood near the door, half in, half out, a habit of teenage boys, as if the future were always tugging at their sleeve. Mara placed the warmer, the pipette, and the little plastic bagged card spangled with freckles of dried crimson neatly on a tray. She set the hard case with the vial beside them. as if making a family portrait of the project. She felt the warmth in her hands come back to her face, 2 tiny giggles of pink at her cheeks, from the heater's steady hum and the relief that had settled onto her shoulders like a shawl. The emergency had dissolved into story. Now came the part where people retell it the rest of the day, smoothing the edges. The principal, reading over a paragraph in a policy manual on her laptop, spoke without looking up. "Ms. Hale, I'll need your signature here and here, and we'll want to draft a brief note for the science fair. No biological samples will be allowed on campus without prior approval. We'll also, if you're willing, support Leela in presenting with simulated materials. Our science teacher, Miss Patel, can provide the kits." "I'm willing," Miss Hale said, and there was a forgiveness curled into the word, the forgiveness of herself. She glanced at Lila. "We'll do it right. With people watching this time." Peter shifted the patch on his jacket, catching the lamplight. I should have asked Miss Patel. I thought it would make me look like I didn't know what I was doing. And I wanted her to be..." He looked at Leela, helplessly earnest. "I wanted her to be proud of me. She is," the mother said immediately with a flinty tenderness. "So am I. I can be proud of you, and also want to sit on your head until you learn to ask for help when help is there." Peter smiled, relief awkward. Noted. Mara, who had been rinsing her hands at the sink even though the gloves had been between her and everything, came back and caught the mother's eye. The memory between them felt like a room they could walk into now. "About that night," she began, and Miss Hale looked up, bracing without needing to, because the tone in Mara's voice had homemade soup in it. "I wanted to say, I was tired. We both were. I think I forgot to let you be scared without me calling it difficult. I'm sorry." The mother blinked. The apology was so unexpected and welcome that it made her laugh a little, then press her knuckles to her eyes. When she dropped her hand, her face had rearranged itself in the way faces do when a bracing has been removed from a healed bone. "Thank you," she said. "I was a lot. I still am sometimes. I'm sorry too," she breathed out. "I've been carrying that just under the skin." "So have I," Mara said simply. "Maybe we can both put it down now." In the pause that followed, the room found its level. Peter wandered to the tray, looked at the lit pipette, the case, the warmer, the card. He was about to touch the pipette and thought better of it, then made a face at himself and touched it anyway, gingerly. "We bought the card online," he confessed, like he was telling an amiable priest. "Miss Patel said we could use simulated reagents, but I wanted to show the real thing. She said real is fine, but only with rules. I thought rules were for people who don't know what they're doing. Turns out rules are for people who want to keep being able to do things." That's an excellent line for your application essay to the paramedic program. The taller EMTs would have said, had he still been there. In his absence, the principal supplied a dignified nod. "Correct," she said. "And also, good sentence." Leela, who had been quiet, finally spoke, leaning forward so her hair fell in a curtain, and she had to blow it away in a puff. "Are we still doing the clumps?" she asked, practical as a scientist with a schedule. "Because we warmed it and all." Mara smiled. "We're going to do them. Just not here, not with this vial. We'll bring this home with your mom after paperwork, and tomorrow we'll ask Miss Patel for a kit to show the idea. You can even use colored water to demonstrate how a reaction would look. Your warm sleeve trick isn't necessary there." She winked, though it was very clever. It was, Miss Hale said, making sure her daughter heard it. It was very clever. She looked at the sleeve like one looks at a puppy who chewed through a shoe, with rueful affection. But no more warming devices sewn into clothing. "Ever," the principal added. "Ever," the mother echoed. "I'll buy you a hand warmer for recess like normal people." They all laughed. The room, which had been the color of worry a half hour ago, was now the color of jokes told on tired feet. The snow outside, more insistent now, patted the window with soft fingerprints. It changed the light on the floor to a more diffuse wash, and the lamp's honey became, as it often does in winter, a small sun around which the room aligned. Peter glanced at the snow and then at his sister. "We should go out before it turns into slush," he said. "Make the first prints. If you're allowed," he added to the adults, who all understood that permission was a road he was going to have to learn to knock on before he ran down it. "You can after we're done," the principal said. She stamped a signature with her crisp little pen. Then she looked at the mother. "Hale, one more signature here." The mother signed and then exhaled in a way that shook her just slightly, as if the atoms in the air had finally loosened their grip on her chest. "Thank you," she said again, to the room, to the process, to the way humans sometimes arrange themselves into help instead of trouble. With the official things complete, the people began to stand and shift toward exits. The principal took the hard case and the form and left with a murmured promise to return. Peter impatiently did that teenage boy shifting that involves a lot of slapping his own thighs lightly with his palms. Leela picked a sticker from the jar, rainbow orange, and stuck it on her palm with deep care. Ms. Hale slid the warmer into her purse with the discretion of someone putting away a love letter. Just as they reached the doorway, Mara, compelled by the small itch that lives in the underside of a nurse's knowing, turned back to the sleeve. She touched the inner hem where the zipper had been hidden and felt the thick seam where the pocket had been sewn in. The stitches were uneven, but strong. She imagined the needle going in and out at a kitchen table. The boy's big hands awkward but determined, the mother's hands quick and practiced. She imagined the conversation, how it must have gone. Is this stupid? Is this brilliant? Will they say it's stupid? Will they see the brilliance? We'll make it safe. We'll make it warm. We'll make it okay. She looked at Ms. Hale and took a step closer. The words she'd been carrying for a long time, from the clinic, from the stubbornness that had been their last meeting, came up again. "I didn't ask you then," she said, "about your support. Who helps you? Who watches you while you watch them?" The mother tilted her head, surprised both by the question and by how badly she wanted to answer it. "My sister," she said. "She's the soup text. And sometimes Peter. He makes dinner when I can't, and sometimes no one. But then you get through, and the next day, the light comes back, and you make promises to be kinder to yourself, and then you keep half of them." Mara smiled. "Half is a good batting average," she said. "If you want to come in tomorrow before school, I'll have the kit from Ms. Patel ready. We'll do it together. We'll make it very impressive and very boring for emergency services." The mother laughed and wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. "I would like that," she said. "A lot." A small voice tugged at them. Mama Leela said, "Can we go make the first footprint?" Peter said, "We can. Please." Her mouth made the please like it was an experiment, too, to see if adults could be coaxed into joy by the deployment of politeness. The principal returned at that moment with the case and a permission slip form for later. "You may," she said, answering the child's question as if she had been part of it all along. "You can do 2 loops in the courtyard, stay where we can see you, and then straight back for last period." They went to the back door of the nurse's office, the one that opened onto the small courtyard enclosed by the 4 arms of the school. It connected to the nurse's office because sometimes kids needed fresh air without the complexity of hall passes. The snow came down like shaken feathers, not yet committed to carpeting the world but trying, and the air smelled like metal and cut ice and bakery. The cafeteria had cookies on the tray. Leela stepped out, her boots making neat ovals, and laughed in that high, unfake way that happens when the world offers too many soft sparkles at once. Peter followed, stomping bigger prints beside her, making shapes that would be stories later. He showed her how to walk backward and change the direction of the animal in the tale they would tell. Maybe they had been followed by a rabbit with big feet. Maybe a dog had danced. Their breath made clouds that hung in the air just long enough to believe in. Hale stood in the doorway to watch, arms folded but not tightly. For the first time in a while, folding her arms was a way to keep warmth in, not a way to hold the world together by force. Mara stood beside her, hands in her pockets, shoulder a respectful inch away. They watched the kids, the snow, the light, the prince. It felt like they stood there a long time. It was probably 4 minutes. "Thank you," the mother said. Not for the first time, but with a different weight now. A tone that suggested not relief but gratitude for the way the last hour had not been cruel. You didn't make me feel small." "I remember how small the night at the clinic made us both," Mara said. "I wanted to do better." "You did," Miss Hale said. They watched as Lila bent to catch a snowflake on her mitten, and then held the mitten up to her eye, as if it were a specimen on a slide. "It looks like a star," she said to no one and everyone. "It is," Peter said. Pleased to know something, to be able to say it the way future medics often say obvious truths. Tenderly, we're all made of them. Back inside, the room felt better used. The zipper on the sleeve lay flat, as if it had reconciled itself to being ordinary. The tray's contents were tidy, safe. The principal, who had watched the snow scene too, trying to pretend she hadn't by fussing with a stapler, cleared her throat. "We'll walk you out," she said to the mother. "We can use the staff door, so you don't have to go through the main hall with everything in your face." "Thank you," the mother said, again and again, as if the sentence had flavors she'd never before tasted and she wanted to get each one. She gathered her purse, the warmer hidden, the sleeve empty, the child tugging at her hand with snow on her boots. They moved down the hall together. The group of them, past the blood drive poster, "Be a Hero," past the bulletin board with paper snowflake. Kids looked up, curious but not burning with it. Adults nodded. The snow beyond the windows made the school feel like a ship moving through a soft, thick sea. At the front, the principal handed the hard case to the mother with a gravity that felt like passing a torch at a relay race. "This is yours," she said. "Bring it back tomorrow if you want to run the demonstration with Ms. Patel, or keep it at home and practice for the fair. With simulated fluids, please." "With colored water," the mother said dutifully. "We'll do it with colored water." "And clear labels," the principal added, because she believed labeling was 5/8 of salvation. "And take pictures. The board loves pictures." "We will," Ms. Hale said and patted her purse, where the little photo of the kids laughing in the kitchen had nested itself like a heartbeat was nested in the day. At the door, the winter's first real gust slipped in and touched their faces with ice like a baptism. Lila squealed, delighted. Peter pretended not to, which is teenager for the same thing. The mother breathed in long. "Smells like soup outside," she said. "It always does on snow days." Mara laughed. "That's a scientific fact. Then, more quietly, come by tomorrow. We'll make your presentation tidy and gorgeous. I have a label maker with a font that looks like a miracle." The mother shook her head at the word miracle, but there was a spark in her eyes, like the flint of hope struck at last. "Okay," she said. "We'll be here." The principal smiled at the scene, her sternness softer than it had been all autumn. "Go on," she said. "Make your footprints." She watched them step out. Peter's long stride, Lila's small, clean jumps, the mother's half-careful, half-carefree steps, and then she looked at Mara. "Good work," she said, simple and true. "Everyone did good work," Mara replied. "Even the zipper." They stood a moment longer, as the snow began making the world new in the way of first snows. The way it writes a clean layer over the errors and tries again. The heater in the office down the hall kicked on, the hum familiar. Somewhere a child laughed at an adult joke they didn't quite understand. The smell of cookies from the cafeteria thickened until you could almost taste the chocolate. And if the story needs its bow, it can be this: that later that week at the science fair, Lila stood at her trifold board under the gym's bright lights, the red and blue letters spelling blood types, a family story. Beside her, a neat array of pipettes and labeled cups of colored water performed agglutination like magic in safety-approved fashion. Miss Patel beamed. The principal nodded in that way that feels like a hand on your back. Peter, in his jacket with the EMT patch, hovered just out of the way, doing his best not to take over while his sister explained the difference between A and B with the serious aplomb of a Nobel laureate.